MSW Media. Thanks to Delete Me for sponsoring our show. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan by texting cleanup20 to 64,000.
So yeah, now it's cleanup on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be cleanup on aisle 45.
Welcome to episode 207 of Cleanup on Aisle 45. It's Wednesday, January 8th, 2025. I'm Allison Gill.
And I'm Harry Dunn.
Hey, Harry, how are you today?
I'm well. I'm a little under the weather. Got a little cold, but that's expected this time of year. So, but I'm okay though, you know.
It seems to be going around. And Harry, I just want to thank you for speaking out all day Monday. And honestly, all weekend leading up to January 6th, reminding people what happened that day so that the Republicans can't whitewash history and doing everything you can to make sure that they don't memory hole what we all saw with our own eyes at the Capitol 4 years ago. So thank you for doing all that, speaking out and causing good trouble, my friend.
Definitely. You know, you're welcome. People like you have, and all the listeners out there, have made it easier for me to keep going and stay motivated. One of the things, it was a stark contrast yesterday in the chamber, Monday, in the chamber on January 6th, where so many people were high-fiving and fist bumping and so much jubilation, and people were taking selfies with J.D. Vance, and it was just a day of celebration. Stark contrast that to 4 years ago, with those same people were hiding under their chairs with gas masks on, hiding behind the Capitol police officers with their guns drawn, not knowing if they were going to make it home to their families. It's just a stark contrast on how things should have been versus how they were. And it was all because of Donald Trump.
Yeah, who was certified yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's a good day in that the peaceful transfer of power happened, which is a pillar of our democracy, but it's a sad day that we reelected the guy who caused all the turmoil.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things that I'll never understand, and I've just chalked it up to people just don't give a damn, enough of a damn, and it's just unfortunate. But we got a good crew here of listeners that do give a damn, and we're going to give y'all all of our energy, and I'm happy to be here. So.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, my friend. And speaking of those amazing listeners, we have some new patrons to thank, people who financially back our show, which really helps because it's blowing up and the costs also along with it are blowing up. So we were expecting a nice, calm, smooth next 4 years, but that hasn't happened. So if you can, help us out at all, we appreciate it. So thank you very much to JQ, Blah, I'm with you, Mo, Andrea Myers, Southern Hell, Jacked, and Patty Robinson. Thank you so very much for supporting independent media. We're going to need it in these next 4 years. All right, we have so much to cover today. I don't know how we're going to do it. And shit is breaking like right now as we're sitting here. So, before we get into what we normally cover on this show, which is going to be Donald Trump's sentencing that's scheduled for 2 days from now, maybe. And of course, Rudy Giuliani. The Jack Smith report has been finished and copies were given. And last night, Jack Smith, Donald Trump wrote a letter to Merrick Garland saying, you have to block this. You can't release the Jack Smith report because I am the supreme whatever. And then, of course, Nauta and De Oliveira filed that their part of the report shouldn't be released down in Florida. And they actually had a much better argument than Donald Trump. And the much better argument, and we'll go over this on the Jack podcast this weekend, was that, hey, this case could still come back. We could still be indicted. And so you can't release the information about the case to the public while it is potentially still ongoing.
I get that. That's kind of fair, right?
I think
fair.
So.
It's fair in a legal sense. It's fair.
I asked that too. I mean, if it were any other defendant, I would hope that the Department of Justice wouldn't release a bunch of crimey stuff about me if I were still, under the threat of indictment.
Yeah, exactly.
So because it would be prejudicial. But, Jack Smith, there's options. Jack Smith could not release the Nauta de Oliveira stuff and just release the Trump stuff, or just release the January 6th stuff and keep volume 2, which is the classified document stuff, under wraps. It'll never see the light of day if it makes it past January 20th. But Judge Cannon decided to come out today, Tuesday, as we record this, and just block the whole report until the 11th Circuit decides on her part. It just doesn't make any sense. And my worry now is that she did that before Garland even got a copy. So Garland didn't even have a chance to release the report before she did some bullshit. So now I worry that the DOJ has to fight her in court to release the stuff that's not even in her jurisdiction. And I'm worried that will delay it past January 20th. But we'll see. Again,
I wonder if a lot of people also wonder, though, because I have to wonder, like, this isn't introducing documentation to the court. Like, they're not releasing this report for the court. So why does the court have authority for something to be released to the public that is not a court document? Like, couldn't they just release it to Congress, and then Congress release it under their authority?
And they might not. The court might not have that authority. She might not have the authority. But do we have to argue that she doesn't have that authority in court? You know what I mean? Like Donald Trump filed all sorts of bullshit that didn't make any sense, but we couldn't ignore it. We had to fight it in court, right? And that's how he wins on delay every single time. So I am curious to see how this plays out. But today, we're talking about Trump's sentencing. I think that might let's start there, because we like to end with Rudy, don't we?
Yeah, since we usually end with Rudy. Which is rightfully so, Rudy bringing up the rear. Let's start with Judge Merchan denying Trump's motion to throw out his 34 felony count conviction and ruling that Trump will be sentenced on January 10th, much to his dismay.
Oh, he's very, very mad. Even though the judge was like, you can do it by Zoom, so it only takes you a couple seconds, and I won't sentence you. I'm inclined, he actually says, to not sentence you to prison, even though you deserve it, he basically said.
Yeah, basically.
But he basically denied all of Trump's motions to throw out the 34 felonies. He did it in an 18-page ruling. First of all, here is a list of all the crap Trump was asking for, okay? It says, defendant argues that, quote, the presidential immunity doctrine, the Presidential Transition Act, and the Supremacy Clause all require dismissal immediately. In support, defendant points not only to his status as president-elect, but also to alleged unlawful conduct by the prosecution, rulings of this court allegedly in violation of defendant's rights, and claimed evidentiary infirmities at trial, which either present a legal impediment to conviction or together require dismissal in the interest of justice. The allegations of unlawful conduct against the New York County District Attorney include claims that he engaged in politically motivated targeting of Donald Trump, unlawfully leaked information about the investigation, leaked is in quotes, tainted the jury pool by making improper public statements, engaged in repeated misrepresentations to this and other courts before, during, and after his trial, and suborned perjury from prosecution witnesses Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels. The defendant also accuses this court of impermissibly presiding over this matter despite the existence of an alleged conflict of interest, and of imposing an unlawful gag order, a reference to this court's order governing extrajudicial statements. That's Trump's complaints.
He wasn't asking for too much there.
What a whiny
Oh
mofo.
My gosh. But here's what District Attorney Alvin Bragg had to say about that. The people opposed defendant's motion, arguing that president-elect immunity does not exist. You made that up, Donald Trump. And that the vast majority of the defendant's claims involved objections that this court and others have repeatedly rejected. The people submit alternative remedies short of a dismissal, which they argue still respect the doctrine of presidential immunity from criminal process, while at the same time respecting the verdict rendered by the New York County jury. The alternative proposals include adjourning sentencing until after defendant completes his term of office, or the application of the Alabama rule, which would effectively permanently abate proceedings without dismissal or the imposition of sentence.
Yeah, so the DA here wasn't even asking him to sentence him. He was like, look, let's pretend he died. That's the Alabama rule, right? And it just ends the case. Or But the problem is, and the judge goes over this, is that robs Donald Trump of his ability to appeal, which is his right? Or let's hold this in abeyance until afterwards. And the judge basically comes to the conclusion that he doesn't like either of those and he wants to sentence Trump. So let's get to that. The judge reminds us that there's scant precedent for the position we find ourselves in. And he explains that while he will rely on the Constitution, the two Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel memos that preclude the prosecution of a sitting president, Trump v. U.S., that's the immunity case, U.S. v. Nixon, Clinton v. Jones, Trump v. Vance, that's not his vice president, that's the first Manhattan District Attorney.
Wouldn't be surprised, though.
I know, right?
Stay tuned.
And the Presidential Transition Act of 1973, that's what he's going to rely on. And he goes on to say that with the exception of Trump v. Vance, all of those are federal considerations, but it makes sense to apply them to state court as well. So he's actually going to look to the OLC memos that, you can't prosecute a sitting president. He's going to look at the Presidential Transition Act. He's going to look at all the federal stuff, Trump, the immunity Trump case, U.S. v. Nixon, Clinton v. Jones. So there's a lot of federal stuff. He says there is not a lot of precedent for a guy who committed a bunch of crimes and got convicted and then got elected. Like, we have none of that ever in our history. So.
Not at all. It also is funny because they say you can't prosecute a sitting president. No, he was already prosecuted.
Yeah.
Like, we're not prosecuting him anymore. That's already been done, and he's not sitting. So,
yep.
But he goes on to say, applying the guidance of the aforementioned sources, this court finds that presidential immunity from criminal process for a sitting president does not extend to a president-elect. Boom. To begin, the Constitution dictates that only a president after taking the oath of office has the authority of the chief executive. A president-elect does not.
Yes, only after taking the oath of office with the flag at half-staff.
Simple.
Which he's real mad about. He's real mad about that.
He is mad about that.
The judge then turns to those concerns that are outlined in the Department of Defense Office, or the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Counsel memos. There's two of them from 73 and 2000, and this is from the year 2000. Remember that from Conan O'Brien? In the year 2000. Yeah. I could just see him now with the helmet reading these three considerations. The actual imposition of a criminal sentence of incarceration goes against the Constitution. The public stigma occasioned by the initiation of criminal proceedings, the initiation, not the conclusion.
Exactly. We're past the initiation.
And the mental and physical demands of assisting with the preparation of a defense for the various stages of a criminal proceeding. Those are the three obstacles that Merchan has to overcome here.
Well, as far as number two, the public stigma, Merchan says, the case at bar is well past the initiation stage, and whatever threat of public stigma from criminal prosecution that might have existed has long passed. Indeed, one of the defendant's most frequent arguments is that his court should defer to the will of the citizenry of who recently reelected him to the office of the executive, notwithstanding an actual guilty verdict in this case. Thus, whatever stigma that might have existed will most certainly not interfere with the defendant's ability to carry out his duties, both as president-elect and as the sitting president.
Yeah, like, we can't make you look bad, dude. We did that 2 years ago. And you still got reelected. So
exactly.
The stigma is not the problem.
Yeah.
He then addresses the third concern, which is the mental and physical demands of assisting with the preparation of a defense, right? Trump had argued that since Jack Smith dismissed his case against him because the burden of prosecution would be too great, that the judge has to vacate this verdict. But Judge Merchan's not buying it. He reminds Trump that this case is over, and all that's left is a brief sentencing hearing via Zoom. Jack Smith hadn't even gone to trial yet in either case, so that's a very different story.
Definitely.
That would take up way much more time. Quote, the vastly different procedural posture of the instant case, this one, renders any comparison to special counsel's indictments unpersuasive. Now, the judge continues by pointing out that the only reason we're here, the only reason we're facing sentencing while he is president-elect is because Trump requested the delay until after the election. And this next part is awesome, Harry. The judge says, defendant has always pronounced since the inception of this case confidence, and indeed the expectation that he would prevail in the 2024 election. Confidence that has proven well-founded, that he would become the president-elect and be required to assume all the responsibilities that come with the transition were entirely anticipated. Thus, it was fair for this court to trust that his request to adjourn sentencing until after the election carried with it the implied consent that he would face sentencing during the window between the election and the taking of the oath of office. Basically, bro, you said you were going to win, and you wanted to be sentenced after you won. And here we are, and now you're saying you don't want to be sentenced.
Now you say you don't want to be sentenced. So it doesn't make sense. It also is funny because they talk about he would fulfilling his roles of the president-elect. Wasn't he playing golf during the speaker's vote, and everything? Like, he's staying on the golf course. Like, what are his roles during as president-elect?
He wouldn't even sign the friggin' transition papers. Like, you're not doing any transition stuff, dude.
At all. Give me a break. But the judge concludes, finding no legal impediment to sentencing and recognizing that presidential immunity will likely attach once defendant takes his oath of office, it is incumbent upon this court to set this matter down for the imposition of sentence prior to January 20th, 2025. As such, in balancing the aforementioned considerations in conjunction with the underlying concerns of the presidential immunity doctrine, a sentence of an unconditional discharge appears to be the most viable solution to ensure finality and allow defendant to pursue his appellate options.
Aha. And it makes sense, right? He's like, I know you wanted to hold this in abeyance, Alvin Bragg, or do the Alabama rule, consider him dead for the purposes of going forward. But I think the clear route is to sentence him before he takes off, before sitting president immunity attaches, and to not sentence him to any probation or fines or anything. And that way, he's still a convicted felon. The jury verdict still stands. But we aren't impeding his ability to be president, right?
Because he still has 10 days to appeal. And he still has 10 days to appeal, no?
Yeah. Yeah. And he can still appeal the whole thing, which could take years, right? Like, he still has the right to appeal because we aren't considering him a dead person. So that's his kind of compromise, right?
He sounds very fair here.
Yeah.
He sounds very fair. And he's conceding, hey, Donald Trump, you said you were going to win.
And you
won.
You
said, you did win. And he's not denying that. He's acknowledged him as president, which Donald Trump likes to say, nobody acknowledges me as a winner. I won. Yes, you won. A lot of people are saying it. Even in the certification, no objections were made. Like, you won the presidency. Everybody's pissed about it, but you won. But you said, let's get sentenced after I win. And like you said earlier, Allison, you won, and now you don't want to be sentenced at all. Wait, it was your idea to say, wait until I get elected.
You gave us the green light.
Good judge by Judge Merchan here. Good
right?
job by him.
It was very well thought out. And there's also a big part of this ruling where he goes over the standards to be successful on what's called a Clayton motion, because Trump filed one of those too to get the whole
Clayton
thing
motion.
To get the whole thing thrown out.
Yeah.
It's like 7 different standards that don't apply to this case at all. And he went through all 7 of them and explained why they don't apply at all and denied him that too. So he's like, he considered every single thing that Trump brought up and that the DA brought up, and he came up with his own solution. So, but that is not the end, Harry. Of course, Trump has appealed, and we're going to go over why the January 10th sentencing hearing isn't certain yet. And we're going to do that after this quick break. Stick around.
Stay tuned.
We'll be right back. Thanks to Delete Me for sponsoring our show. You can take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan by texting cleanup20 to 64,000. Because did you know that your personal data, like your home address, phone number, email addresses, family members' addresses, all of that is likely being sold online by data brokers. They gather the information, they scrape the internet for it, and sell it without your knowledge or permission. It's unsettling, and it puts us all at risk. As someone with an active online presence and an opinion, I felt the vulnerability of having my information exposed. It's not just inconvenient, it's dangerous. It can lead to serious real-world issues like identity theft and scams or harassment. I recently found a solution, though. It's called Delete Me. Delete Me is a subscription service that removes your personal info from hundreds of data broker sites. Their process is really straightforward. You sign up, you tell them exactly what you want removed, and their team handles the rest. They do all the heavy lifting. And they even send personalized privacy reports that show everything they found, where they found it, and what they successfully removed. And they tell me how much time I saved myself by not having to go and have it removed myself. And what sets them apart at Delete Me is year-round protection. They're always monitoring and removing your information, ensuring your privacy stays intact. So it's not just a one-and-done thing. So take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special discount for listeners. Today, you can get 20% off your Delete Me plan by texting CLEANUP20 to 64,000. That's CLEANUP20 to 64,000. Text CLEANUP20 to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details.
Welcome back. After the ruling we went over before the break, Trump filed a motion to Judge Merchan appealing his decision, which Judge Merchan quickly denied, and that was followed by an appeal to the New York First Appellate Division. Lisa Rubin, I love Lisa Rubin, by the way.
Me too.
She's fantastic. Lisa Rubin writes for MSNBC's Maddow blog. In the wake of Judge Juan Merchan's decision last week to preserve the New York hush money indictment and jury verdict against President-elect Donald Trump, my phone blew up with breathless questions like, will you be at the sentencing? And do you think he'll show? What a question. Not so fast. I told my family and friends Merchan's opinion, as well as Trump's choice in appellate maneuver, suggests to me, a former litigator and close observer of Trump's hush money trial, that a January 10th sentencing is no sure thing.
Yep. And she's fantastic. The reason I picked her article here from Maddow blog is because she explains things so well. She says, first, it's not at all clear to me that Merchan actually expects to hold a sentencing hearing on January 10th or at any other time. What makes me say this? His own opinion. Indeed, given that Merchan wrote that his inclination is, quote, to not impose any sentence of incarceration and instead to consider a sentence of unconditional discharge, which is legal speak for no penalty at all, as the most viable solution, you might be asking why Merchan would even schedule a sentencing at all. And there are likely a few reasons, including that a sentence is necessarily, in virtually all circumstances, both to preserve a jury verdict and to enable a defendant to exercise his appellate rights, which is exactly what we talked about in the A block, Harry. On Friday, on Alex Wagner Tonight, Lisa posed a third possibility, that Merchan, knowing that even the Manhattan District Attorney's team no longer seeks jail time as practicable, given Trump's countdown to becoming president, at least wanted to ensure that Trump, like any other convicted defendant, would have to stand before a court of law and listen to its strong, humbling description of his conduct. But that's when MSNBC legal analyst Christy Greenberg, another great person, former Manhattan-based federal prosecutor of many years, observed that sections of the opinion themselves sound like what judges say at sentencing proceedings. For example, rejecting Trump's argument that the crimes for which he was convicted are comparably not so grave, Merchan castigated Trump for the premeditated and continuous deception that underlie his conviction on 34 counts with the intent to defraud, including, quote, an intent to commit or conceal a conspiracy to promote a presidential election by unlawful means. So she's like, it sounds like he's given him the sentencing hearing in this ruling.
Ruling right there. Yeah, it's interesting. She continues, throughout the opinion, Merchan also bemoans Trump's lack of remorse, noting his unrelenting and unsubstantiated attacks against the integrity and legitimacy of this process, individual prosecutors, witnesses, and the rule of law. A lot of times, if you all remember during that trial, Merchan had to stop Trump from making those statements about the court, the prosecutors. So he definitely did. He observed that Trump, on his multiple occasions, pursued a claim with increasing indignation while simultaneously failing to acknowledge that this court's ruling on those subjects have been repeatedly upheld. Do those words read as if Merchan understood when calibrating his opinion that because of Trump's expected appellate efforts, this could be his last public statement in Trump's case? They sure do.
Yeah. She goes on to say, speaking of Trump's anticipated appeals, on Sunday, he asked Merchan to stay all remaining proceedings. meaning the sentencing hearing, in light of his intent to appeal on Merchan's recent holdings. But the notice of the stay filing underscores that while Trump himself is often predictable, his lawyers are not. Many legal observers, present company included, says Lisa Rubin, thought Trump would turn immediately to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, aka that's the federal appeals court for New York, for relief. After all, he already has a related appeal pending in that court. But after waiting all weekend for a federal filing, we learned instead Trump's team has 2 state court rabbits up their sleeve: a direct appeal of Merchan's post-verdict decisions to retain the verdict and indictment, and what's known as an Article 78 proceeding, a New York-specific process through which the government actors can be sued directly for deprivations of a litigant's constitutional rights. And he filed both of those.
But focusing on who ultimately wins or loses ignores the bigger issue here: delay. Delay, delay, delay. All Trump needs is one or more judges of the Appellate Division First Department, the applicable first-tier appeals court, to press pause on the sentencing until 12:01 p.m. on January 20th, when Trump becomes president once more. That's also when, by virtue of taking the oath and for the duration of his term in office, Trump will again have immunity from any and all prosecutions and related proceedings. And where temporary stays are concerned, the First Department hasn't always been a disappointment for Trump. On the contrary, it has come through for Trump on a handful of occasions, including by granting a 2-week stay of a gag order in another case, thereby freeing Trump to speak freely about the alleged biases of the judge in that case and his clerk. Now imagine how a 2-week stay of the sentencing in this case would serve Trump's objective even more clearly. Pausing the sentencing for 2 weeks would mean that Trump, who will again become president on January 20th at 12:01 p.m., could not be sentenced, if at all, until January 20th, 2029, when he is no longer president.
Yeah, if he is no longer president.
I like that if.
Trump and his lawyers asked Merchan to tell them by 2 p.m. Eastern on Monday whether he intends to go forward with sentencing. Otherwise, they vowed to seek emergency appellate review. And indeed, by Monday evening, Merchan denied their stay request. That's what we talked about in the first block, finding Trump's argument to be primarily a repetition of the arguments he raised numerous times in the past. And Trump's team has filed that Article 78 action, which accuses Merchan and the Manhattan District Attorney of serious and continuing infringement on his presidential immunity from criminal process. Given this, Lisa Rubin says, I'm expecting a flurry of activity in New York appeals courts this week, and that none of it will end in sentencing. That's what she thinks, that none of it will end in sentencing.
Well, I like Lisa Rubin until she gives that little caveat. No, I still like you, Lisa, but man.
We do have breaking news. We have breaking news as we're sitting here. And this comes from Anna Bauer at Lawfare. The First Division Appellate Court, where he filed that 78 thing, Article 78 action, scheduled a hearing on Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. And they just finished it as we are recording this right now.
Wow.
Yeah, they just finished it. The judge didn't sound too positive about what Trump's lawyers were putting down. She wasn't picking it up. And moments ago, the judge denied Donald Trump's request for an emergency stay. Great news. Yes. So now.
Wow. Okay.
One court left, which is it's the top court in New York, but it's not called the Supreme Court. Where Merchan sits is actually called the Supreme Court. Yeah. The appeals court is called the First Division. Well, here for him, it's the First Division Appellate Court. The main court is the New York Court of Appeals. So
wow. Okay.
He will probably appeal to the top court in New York State. But again, Lisa Rubin mentions we expect him to go to the Second Circuit. Who knows how many times he'll try to delay this. And asking again, just for an emergency stay, which is like an administrative thing, like, give us a couple of weeks to figure it out. And then we'll decide if we're going to grant a longer stay. But like she said, a couple of weeks
is all that he needs.
Yeah, that's all that he needs.
Man.
So we will keep you posted.
Stay tuned. I'm about to say a flurry. You described it right as a flurry. She described it as a flurry of activity. I wish the Supreme Court moved that fast.
Right?
Lord have mercy, man.
Yeah, or Eileen Cannon. But she can move fast when she wants to block Jack Smith.
Tell me about it.
but
Ugh.
not for anything else.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the latest we have as of this minute, Tuesday afternoon, January 7th. Things could change rapidly. The sentencing is still on for January 10th, and we'll see if it holds through the state's top court. All right, we got to talk about Rudy, because all that stuff with Trump went down this past week. Now we got a ton of stuff going on.
We got a lot of Rudy stuff coming up right here.
We got 2 blocks of Trump and 2 blocks of Rudy. So we'll get to it right after this break. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. All right. We need 2 blocks for Rudy this week. First up, his response to Judge Beryl Howell. Keep in mind, he's got 3 contempt things going on right now. 2 with Judge Lyman, 1 with Judge Howell. The one with Judge Howell is the one where he keeps defaming Ruby Freeman and Shea Moss. And Ruby Freeman and Shea Moss filed a contempt motion saying he keeps defaming. He's violating your court order, Judge Howell. Make him stop. Hold him in contempt, right? And they didn't request anything specific for contempt, just whatever the court deemed appropriate. Rudy's response was due December 2nd, but he was like, I can't find a lawyer because you're such a shitty judge. And then she's like, okay, dude, this motion is denied because you forgot to sign it and you call yourself a lawyer. Cool beans. So he refiled, and she gave him until January 2nd, which was only 6 days ago. And he found a new lawyer, and he managed to file a response. So this is that response for contempt, the contempt motion filed by Ruby Freeman and Shea Moss because Rudy won't stop defaming him. His defense is, I'm going to try to make sense out of it.
All right, good luck. Here we go.
Yeah. It's not as bad, though, as Camerata's writing, I will say. So at least I can decipher it. The defense is still ridiculous, but it at least makes more sense. After defendant Rudy Giuliani made a handful of comments totaling less than 2 minutes out of a podcast output involving hundreds of hours of online video, the plaintiffs immediately seized on these comments as violations of the consent judgment entered in this case. Without adequately analyzing the comments at issue, and thus failing to present a clear and convincing evidence of a violation, and without considering Rudy Giuliani's substantial compliance with the consent judgment since its entry, and the availability of litigation privilege as a defense against liability, plaintiffs rushed to hold Giuliani in civil contempt and assess sanctions against him. But carefully assessed, Giuliani's comments do not violate a fair reading of the consent judgment with which Giuliani, a prolific media personality, has been in good faith and substantial compliance. Again, here, I just have to break in and say the substantial compliance comes from hundreds of hours, only 2 minutes we defamed him. He goes on to say sanctions would in any event be inappropriate here because the proper remedy, if a violation were found, would be the entry of a conditional order only followed by sanctions upon violating that order. So he wants a new order to come out. He will.
Lord him.
They're like, you violated this order that she put out. No. No, we need a new order. And if we violate that, then we should have contempt. So it goes on, the U.S. Supreme Court and the D.C. Circuit advocate restraint in the application of the court's power to act as judge and jury in the exercise of its contempt power. Nowhere is restraint more warranted than here, where Giuliani has scrupulously avoided any mention of the Freeman litigation except for the limited and vague 90 seconds at issue in this proceeding, made in the context of the defendant's articulation of his position on appeal, and thus protected by litigation privilege. So he's saying, yeah, I said the same lies, but I was talking about this litigation, and that comes with litigation privilege, so you can't get me in trouble for that. And even if you wanted to, you should just make another order and then get mad at me if I violate that one.
Yeah, I only talked bad about him for 2 minutes out of 100. Like, come on, guys. It's not that bad. Jesus. But wait, there's more. Next, he argues that his statements weren't defamation. Plaintiffs first argue that Giuliani's statements that he was telling the truth, and they're going to sue me again for saying it, violates the consent judgment. I'm telling the truth, guys. Like, watch this.
And they're going to sue me again. You just admitted.
My gosh. However, these vague, contentless statements do not clearly violate a court order. Contentless statements. Wow. The content of the truth Giuliani was stating is not specified, and that he would be sued again does not necessarily mean he would be sued again for any particular statements. What? Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss then argue that the statements again falsely accuse plaintiffs of wrongdoing in the 2020 election, specifically counting the same ballots multiple times, using a hard drive to manipulate voting machines, and throwing people and observers out of State Farm Arena while it served as a vote tabulating center.
Okay, so he's about to tell us why. He's about to tell us why when Rudy said they were counting the same ballots multiple times, using a hard drive to manipulate voting machines, throwing people out of State Farm Arena. He's about to tell us why those statements don't count as defamation. You ready? This is good.
Note 10 references a 6-second stretch of audio from the November 12, 2024 podcast in which Giuliani states, "Let me show the tapes that showed them quadruple counting ballots," and 11-second stretch of audio from the November 4th, 2024 podcast in which Giuliani states, "And these women, where you can see, if you want, in living color, her quadruple counting votes." Okay, Ruth, that sounds like a defamation to me. He goes on, obviously, the November 14th, 2024 audio clips cannot be used as a basis to claim that the November 12th, 2024 clip violated the court order. The November 14th, 2024 podcast excerpt standing alone does not violate the court order because the context makes unclear what women, specifically Giuliani, is referring to. Oh my, listen, this is an actual argument that they are making right here.
He was talking about other women.
The other people, like
at State Farm Arena that I've accused of quadruple counting ballots and having hard drives.
Unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. He also says Giuliani has the sincere belief that there was multiple counting of ballots in the 2020 election, and that the video evidence shows that there was a reasonable basis for his belief that would preclude a finding that he acted with a degree of fault necessary to establish liability in the trial on the merits. But the court already ruled on that. They already said that was defamation and you can't say those things, and barred him from saying them. Another podcast clip, this is from Note 11, identifies an 8-second clip in which Giuliani says, quote, "And another one is they're passing these little hard drives that we maintain were used to fix the machines," unquote.
Weren't they? They were passing a mints to each other,
mint,
right?
yeah.
Mints, cinnamon mints. My goodness.
Mm-hmm. And Rudy's lawyer says, again, the context is Giuliani's pending appeal and his summary of what his position on appeal will be. That's what he's going to tell him on appeal. Very clearly, Giuliani is not repeating as fact any of the actionable statements. Rather, he's stating his opinion that A, he should have had an opportunity to present evidence to a jury, and B, that his opinion is one of the things it looks like, not the only thing or necessary thing, is that there was repeat ballot counting. So he's trying to hide this as, I was just talking about my appeal.
Lord
and so I have litigation privilege. And so you can't come at me for any of this.
There's more. Next up is footnote 12. Note 12 references a 6-second extract from the November 14th podcast. As noted, comments in the November 14th podcast cannot retroactively provide content to vague statements in the November 12th podcast, as the November 12th listener obviously did not know the future.
Obviously, Harry.
Jesus Christ, man.
You can't prove I was talking about these two specific women.
You can't see the future.
People can't see the future.
The statement itself is a truncated portion of a sentence, the people thrown out of the arena, like I said, and omits the beginning of the sentence, you can see. Again, a clear reference to the argument that Giuliani intends to present on appeal and to the jury on remand, namely that his opinion is that you can see people being thrown out of the arena, an opinion with which he believes a reasonable jury could concur, thus foreclosing a finding of actual malice. Who the hell else were you talking about, Rudy?
Well, when I stabbed the guy, it was my opinion that he was a bad dude.
Unbelievable.
And that I had the right to stab him. So that precludes actual malice and murder, doesn't it?
Oh, my gosh.
Finally, he argues what should happen if the court does find his statements violated the court order, which they totally do. He says, if the court finds that the consent judgment has been disobeyed, the appropriate remedy is the issuance of a conditional order, a new order, finding Giuliani in contempt and threatening to impose a specific penalty if certain actions are not taken. So I only defamed him for 93 seconds. And it wasn't defamation because I was talking about it as it relates to my appeal. And they were just opinions anyhow. And even if you think my statements violate the court order, you shouldn't hold me in contempt. You should issue another order telling me to stop it and retract my statements, and then punish me if I violate that order. that's his defense.
That's his defense in a nutshell. Unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. But I will say, I can understand this one as it's written.
This is true. I also can understand why Donald Trump picked him as his lawyer. Like, a lot of the dumb stuff that Donald Trump says, like, it makes sense now that Rudy was his lawyer, the one rolling this stuff out for him. My goodness.
Mm-hmm. I especially love they don't know the future.
They can't see the future. They don't know what I was going to say.
Oh, man. All right. So that's one contempt thing. We don't have a ruling yet. As I sit here, I just checked the docket. Judge Howell has not ruled on this contempt motion or Rudy's filing. Because, as you know, this Friday, while Trump is being sentenced, if the sentencing holds, Rudy will be in front of Judge Howell for a hearing based on what you just read and what we just heard. So,
whoa, that is Friday. Wow. You know what? I'll be in court on Friday supporting Sergeant Gunnell. I wonder if I can make my way down to Rudy's courtroom.
Yeah. Judge Beryl Howell is just right down the hall.
Right down the hall.
Let's stop in and say hi to Judge Shelton for me.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Be like, sorry about the bullshit.
Exactly. We'd probably just cry and I'd give her a hug, you know?
Yeah, I know. All right, but guess what? That's not all. There was another contempt hearing for Rudy this past Friday, so we have to talk about that.
There's more, guys. There's more.
This is a totally different judge, totally different thing. This is about the turnover order of all of his stuff. His signed Joe DiMaggio jersey and his Lauren Bacall Mercedes-Benz. And the fact that he didn't hand over a single page of discovery for the upcoming trial that starts January 16th for whether or not his Florida condo is his primary residence. He's arguing that since it's his primary residence, homesteading rules say that it is not subject to bankruptcy laws, and so he doesn't have to turn it over in this case. And it didn't go well for him. We'll talk about it right after the break. Stick around.
Welcome back, y'all. We have one more Rudy case to go, and this is the contempt hearing in front of Judge Lyman. This is the one about his failure to hand over discovery for the trial later this month that is meant to decide whether Rudy's Palm Beach condo is his primary residence. In Florida, your primary residence can be protected from bankruptcy, and Rudy is trying to claim that Florida has been his main home since July of 2023. There was a hearing January 3rd, but they didn't get to finish, and the hearing continued Monday.
Yeah, it wasn't good at first. Rudy, the judge actually seemed pretty sympathetic to the fact that he doesn't know where all of his stuff is, and half of it his ex-wife could have and all this other stuff. But first, before they even got to the hearing, Rudy said he was too sick to show up. And then Freeman and Moss were like, fine, but if you zoom in, you can't take the stand in your own defense. And the judge agreed and said, Rudy, if you don't show up in person, none of your testimony will be taken into account. So Rudy showed up. It didn't go well for him. He was combative. He admitted he still hasn't turned over title to the car or the New York apartment. He played semantics games when the Freeman and Moss lawyer showed him emails of his that he failed to turn over. He was like, see this email? You didn't turn it over. See this email? You didn't turn it over. Rudy claimed that he didn't think emails counted as communications. When they were like, hand over all communications, he was like, that doesn't include email. And he shit his face when the lawyer showed him an application Rudy filled out an application to join a credit union in New Hampshire and checked the box saying, yes, New Hampshire is my primary
residence. Yes.
He's like, I don't recall. And this is from NBC on Monday. A federal judge in New York has found former Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani in contempt of court for not complying with orders to turn over information about his assets to a pair of former Georgia election workers that he defamed.
You know what? That was actually, I do remember that. I was sitting on set at MSNBC about to go on the air, and I saw it break, and I was like, that made me happy. It made me smile in the midst of my sadness on January the 6th. I grinned a little bit because I knew I couldn't wait to talk about this with you. So, oh my gosh. Lyman said Giuliani, the former New York mayor and U.S. attorney, willfully violated an unambiguous order of the court. Unambiguous. It was straightforward. This was clear by failing to provide the information when he was supposed to. The defendant has attempted to run the clock by stalling, he said. Discovery is not supposed to be a shell game where the hidden ball is moved around and around, he added.
I like how he had to explain a shell game to Rudy Giuliani.
Exactly. That's the thing in New York. They put the cups in, follow the ball, win a prize.
Yep.
He said he'd rule on appropriate sanctions against Giuliani later. He also said he had found some key documents that Freeman and Moss had been waiting for, the proprietary lease for his multi-million-dollar Manhattan apartment and the title for his Mercedes-Benz convertible. Both documents, however, include his divorced wife on the titles and need to be amended before Freeman and Moss's attorney can use them.
Okay, so he all of a sudden after Friday found Jesus and found these documents in his house.
Yeah.
He magically found him over the weekend. A trial will be held in New York on January 16th to determine the status of Giuliani's Florida condo and possession of his Yankees World Series rings. Remember, he claims he gave them to his son Andrew.
Yeah.
Then the judge granted the adverse inferences, narrow to the responses to interrogatories 4 and 8 that we talked about last week and preclusions that we spoke about. His ruling from the bench went like this. Plaintiffs have moved. This is from Inner City Press, by the way, who gave a little play-by-play. They're on Twitter. They're on Blue Sky. You can find them wherever. It says plaintiffs have moved for sanctions against defendant. The motion is granted. The court found that the defendant's objections were meritless. He was ordered to answer by December 20th, and the defendant violated that order. The court directed the defendant to answer why the plaintiff's motion should not be granted. Under Rule 37, the court has this power. And he cited Chevron v. Donziger. And as then Judge Gorsuch wrote, discovery is not a shell game. So he was quoting Gorsuch. The court takes judicial notice that the defendant was until recently a barred attorney and has committed discovery violations in the past. He has lost on both procedural and substantive questions. It was not even close. He violated the court's order.
This isn't new. Rudy's used to this.
It's not even close. You violated the court's order. Defendant could have asked for a confidentiality order, but he didn't. He has offered a series of shifting meritless objections. The court concludes that the defendant has been attempting to run the clock. The objections were pretextual. The plaintiffs have shown prejudice, too, because the court has a January 16th trial date, 10 days from today. There's not enough time now for the plaintiffs to seek the deposition of the defendant's advisors to investigate where they were located, right? Like, where were all your people that, on your staff? Where were they living? We want to depose them, but they can't now because Rudy didn't answer any of the questions. He goes on to say the defendant didn't respond on December 31st either. That's relevant. Having considered the range of sanctions, fees are not appropriate, but also wider sanctions are not necessary. A narrow adverse inference is appropriate here as to interrogatories 4 and 8. The inference is that the location and any changing of advisors would not support the defendant's homestead argument. Even without these sanctions, the trier of fact could draw a permissive adverse inference anyway. So even if I didn't tell the jury that you don't live there, people are going to know you're full of shit anyway. I love that.
That's a great line in there. Absolutely.
The court also finds Mr. Giuliani in contempt. So we've done the part where they got their adverse inferences for the trial. Now the court finds Giuliani is in contempt. There was no substantial compliance. He has not produced a single email responsive to the RFPs. He had the emails going to his travel, but he failed to produce them. On the contempt sanctions, the court takes it under advisement and will give it more serious thought. I am reserving judgment. That is the order of the court. So he's basically lost his January 16th trial already, trying to prove Florida is his primary residence. That's going to make it much easier for Freeman and Moss to take ownership of that Palm Beach condo, which is worth $3.5 million. And we'll keep you posted on the rest of the sanctions for contempt, which could be fines, probably not jail time, but I mean, everything's on the table. It's just going to be
with Rudy, I mean, who knows what he's going to say out of his mouth or what he's going to say to the, jail time may not be on the table, but the way he's going, I feel like the judges are sick of him. I mean, just as much as if the judges are, can you imagine how Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman feel? Like, my gosh, man, they need some pain and suffering money on top of the defamation awards they got. Man.
Yeah, it's
poor them. But good for Rudy though.
Geez. So next stop for Rudy is this Friday.
I thought you were going to say it, next stop an ATM machine. Pay up, Rudy.
His debit cards are all frozen. He can't get shit. But he's like, I can't even take a cab. There was another explosion in court when he yelled at the court sketch artist this week, saying, "You made me look like my dog." He was really mad.
Did he say that really? Oh my gosh, that is hilarious.
He was very, very upset. It's like, well, you were really angry all the time. I'm sorry. Just really good, prolific sketch artistry, though, coming out of that court. But next stop, Judge Beryl Howell, federal court. If you're going to be down the hall, stop on in.
I think I might stop in. Sergeant Goodell is testifying with another January 6th case where somebody had assaulted him. Those cases are still going on, and I applaud the Justice Department for pursuing them all the way up until they're told not to. So we'll be there on Friday, still seeking justice and accountability. That fight never stops. And I would love to just peek my head in and just give Rudy a big old smile.
All 6'7" of you.
Absolutely.
Like,
just a big old smile. Hey, Rudy.
You got any special Rudy shirts you can wear underneath?
I wish I did. No, I don't. But or just run some hair dye down my face, and I think you get the message right.
That's extra funny because you don't have any hair.
I know, right?
Well, neither does he, really. So what's the
exactly? What's the point, Rudy?
He was dyeing those little sideburns
or whatever.
Ring. But anyway, so he'll be there. Judge Beryl Howell. Again, that's the contempt for continuing to defame the two. It's got nothing to do with the turnover or sanctions for the upcoming trial in Judge Lyman's court. And we'll see what happens. We'll also see if the sentencing holds for Donald Trump. So far, it's made it past the appeals court, the second level of courts, still probably to go up to the third and maybe even federal court. We shall see. All right, that's our show. Again, thanks to our new patrons. If you want to become a patron, please do. It's patreon.com/aisle45pod, AISLE45POD. We appreciate everything that you guys can give. Otherwise, this is a totally free podcast. So we, again, just appreciate you listening. Do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here for this one of these last couple of weeks under President Joe Biden?
No, I'm just waiting to see everything that's happening. It's I feel like everybody else. It's just we're playing the waiting game and we're just responding accordingly. I think I saw somewhere where Donald Trump said that he's going to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. And there's all this talk about Greenland now. And
he says he's not using military force off the table.
That's insane.
For Greenland and Panama.
I mean, he's watching what Putin is doing. The threat of China with Thailand. It's so much going on right now. And it's just like, God, y'all just frustrated just like y'all. But me and Alice are going to keep showing up and reporting the news to you all, and hopefully having some suggestions on how to fight back. Allison, you had a good suggestion for some of your followers on Blue Sky about the report. Write your letter to Merrick Garland.
Yeah, you can go to the Department of Justice website and you can send a message to the Attorney General, which I did. I said, you need to release the report. He doesn't have it yet. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Jack Smith was like, I'll give it to you Tuesday at 1. And then Judge Cannon came out and blocked them both. And
but we need to make sure that when he does get it, there isn't any hesitation in his mind. I need to get this out to the public. The public deserves it.
Yeah. And Christy Greenberg is saying that her order says Smith can't release any of it. So his only recourse is to appeal to the 11th Circuit on an emergency basis. Should they swiftly reverse her order blocking the release of the January 6th volume, but it could take time to review redactions in the Florida volume to ensure no harm to the co-defendants. So we'll give you the update on Sunday's episode of the Jack podcast. I'm sure we'll have a lot more information by then. Thank you again for listening. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week. And of course, if you're a patron, we'll see you this weekend on the bonus episode. And Harry and I are going to be hosting like a super mega Zoom happy hour Q&A on January 17th.
This is going to be fun.
7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific. It's going to be for the Beans and Cleanup on Aisle 45 patrons. I know a lot of you are that Venn diagram is basically a circle, so appreciate you. But we're also going to be celebrating my birthday.
I can't wait. I'm gonna have Jameson in your honor.
Oh, thank you, Jameson 20 though, right?
Make absolutely. Only the best for you.
None of that fresh stuff.
None of that stuff.
Do you remember that from
Yes.
The Jerk, where he's like, take this back and bring us some fresh wine.
Fresh wine.
None of this old wine.
Fresh
what do you
stuff.
take us for? 2 boobs. There's old wine. You got snails on the food. Don't they know they're dealing with classy people? Oh, man. Now I'm going to go watch The Jerk.
That is great. That's great.
That's your homework for this weekend. Do something that makes you laugh.
Absolutely. So, well, great. Thank you, Allison. It was a great show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll see you all next week. I've been Allison Gill.
Harry Dunn. Thanks, y'all.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.